the first question, I would love to just make that topic very broad to you. How do you think entrepreneurship chose you?
I think there are a couple ways to answer this question. One, I know a lot of entrepreneurs, I think more than most entrepreneurs know. And the reason why is because the nature of what my company does, the hub, is we have, you know, thousands of brands that have used our platform, and I call a lot of them just customer service stuff, and I talk to lots of small companies. And when it's a small company, it's usually the founder that, or someone quite high up, if not the founder that I'm speaking to. And in my experience, there's sort of two flavors of founders. I know one guy, for example, he's from my hometown and he's used my platform. He worked as a consultant and he has documented his journey since the beginning, his entrepreneurship journey. And he was very open about testing 5 different products to see which one had the most traction, like 5 completely different things. One might have been a granola bar, and one might have been a nut butter, and they're all food things. One might have been a, sparkling water. And he wanted to see which of those spaces had the most potential and the most momentum. And then he picked the product and then he started a company. And so for him, it's always been, in consulting, it's called a case, or in business school, it's called a case. Sort of like a academic exercise in, like, can I identify a space that is disruptible and come up with something to thrust into it that people want to buy? And it's sort of a math problem, a economics problem, just an academic challenge. And then on the other hand, one of my other clients, he and his wife started the project in their kitchen, making it for themselves. And it came out of like a real need and a real want and a real, honest place. And so there's a real passion behind it because they were sort of solving, there's this story you hear a lot. I had a problem, I solved it for me, and then I realized other people had this problem and I started solving it for them. And those stories, it almost sounds like entrepreneurship or the company is pulled out of you. Like, whoops, I didn't mean for that to happen. It just sort of happened. Other people seem to like it. And so I guess I just did it. Whereas in the first scenario, you pull it out of yourself. You're like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Let me figure out how to do this. And I tend to have much more respect for the people who start out of passion. And I tend to think they succeed more than most, because no matter how smart you are or how like big the opportunity, it's really hard and really lonely and really treacherous. And in those moments of darkness, which happen weekly for most entrepreneurs, if it's just your mind leading you, your mind is weak, but your heart, your passion can carry you through if you really believe in it. So um, I think people that start a company from heart will succeed more than those that started with their mind. And I would describe myself that way, which is to say, like, I just sort of, I witnessed and experienced the pain point that I'm trying to solve for with my company. I worked at an ad agency and watched content being made for large companies in the most inefficient and expensive and thoughtless ways. I, in the early days of my company, got to know hundreds and ultimately thousands of young, incredibly talented photographers that are nobodies. They work at Starbucks and they live in some suburb of some random city, and they're never going to shoot for a brand anyone's heard of because they're never going to be found. And so these big brands that are doing it so wrong, and these little photographers that have so much talent, it's like, if only they could find each other. And so there's like a deep passion that drives what I do. And that's the company has sort of vomited out of that. Not like me sitting in a room being like, what can I do? What can I do?
Why photography specifically as your path for entrepreneurship?
My therapist asked me that the other day. I want to say part of it's a coincidence, but I guess it's not. I mean, the first thing I really felt connected to as a young person was I got as a graduation gift, well, actually, When I was 17, I went on a vacation with my family and my grandmother, and she had a camera and she let me borrow it. And I remember it was on a beach, and I remember carrying the camera around so carefully, like if I drop this thing, she's gonna kill me. In retrospect, it was a pretty cheap, simple camera, but I took a picture of two pelicans diving, and just by complete luck, caught it at the moment where their beaks were touching the water, and they were completely vertical, and it almost looked like they'd been photoshopped in, or they were, sculptures or something. Like they were just resting on the water with their beaks just touching. And I showed it to some people we'd become friends with on the vacation, and a couple more people, and everyone was like, this is amazing. And I got this thrill of having captured something and people responding to it, and it was infectious. And so I asked for my graduation present the next year I took photography courses my senior year in high school, because I guess I just took one. And then I asked for a camera, and I got a camera, and I got really into it. And I took it in college. And then I apprenticed for free for a photographer in New York the next summer. And then the next summer, I got a job as a photographer for a newspaper. And I really thought I might become a photographer. And I think I probably at some point along the way realized that I wasn't that talented. You know, I was okay. But it's so hard to break in. And um, it's not like I painfully gave up on the dream. It was more of a slow process of just being like, maybe it's just more that I'm like a creative guy. And so I went into advertising and whatever, and I still shoot, but I kind of like, I wasn't alive when, or I was alive, but I wasn't of age when Instagram was having this moment. I wasn't part of this boom where anyone could be discovered, where there was a democratized way of finding people. So I think probably deep down part of this is like, it's the path not taken for me. And I see some of myself in a lot of these young photographers that we work with.
To take that a step further, do you think that taking that initial passion for photography, but applying the skills that you've learned at the ad agency and through marketing and just what you know, is that how you define your entrepreneurship?
I think like what's at the core of my entrepreneurship, and what I hope will continue to be, is efficiency of connectivity. Efficiency of connectivity. That's how I'd summarize my mandate, my entrepreneurial one-liner. And so right now it's connecting photographers to brands in a way that is more efficient than they're currently able to find each other. But I've been doing this my whole life. I mean, if you're friends with me, you've been to one of my dinner parties where I have 10 people and there are 6 courses, and it's about bringing this complex meal together, but it's about bringing a different, very distinct group of people together. I grew up in a house where every holiday we'd have members of my dad's family and my mom's family come to our house. And I never thought much of it, but in retrospect, this idea that my immediate family was the connective tissue, that my dad's side and my mom's side, these in-laws, like extended families, are incredibly close. And like outside of the holidays, spend time with each other and stuff. And that our little family was the breeding ground for that. Um, my dinner parties, I made a short film before starting this company with a crew of 15 people and a cast of 3, and with my cousin. So I think I've always been really interested in like, how do I bring together a really interesting group of people and to create something really beautiful as a team, as a unit, and something that maybe is even greater than the sum of its parts, because it is correctly orchestrated. It's like having a bunch of musicians but no conductor. It's like the musicians bring so much, obviously, maybe 99%, but until that last 1%, until you have the conductor that's correctly bringing them in at the correct moments, it's just a lot of potential energy. And I'm sort of fascinated by that last little piece. And I don't want to take more credit than I deserve. It might only be the last 1%, but it is that last 1% that kind of it's all these gears sitting there. And it's just that last little that makes the whole system start spinning and turning. I'm really fascinated by that last little piece.
This idea of the prompt, how entrepreneurship chose me, is really interesting because of the activity of what's doing the choosing, which is the entrepreneurship. Obviously, there was probably a considerable amount of you choosing, okay, this is the path I'm going to follow now. But I'm just curious why this idea of entrepreneurship choosing you resonates so deeply.
I think as I've done a lot of the personal work that you and I have talked about and realizing what makes me me, you know, they're like the five big traits if you look them up. It's, neuroticism, extroversion, openness, conscientiousness, and one other one I can't remember. And we all are on the spectrum for each of these traits, and they're predictors of a lot of things in life. I'm off the charts trait extroversion, off the charts trait neurotic. I'm very neurotic. I'm very open. I'm actually a weird mixture of some of these things you don't see a lot. I have abounding energy. My mom tells stories as a kid of me. I would go through her spice drawer and get out a mixing bowl at age 3 or 4 and like mix together all the spices and taste them and mix them. And that's expensive. She probably would spend $50 a month buying new spices to let her little son play. And it wasn't just sort of reckless abandon. It was really like trying to understand how they all melded. Or like I would, go to the grocery store to shop with her, and her reward to me for coming, because she was very intent on healthy eating and so on. We lived on a farm, was I could get one sugary cereal. That was my reward, or one cereal of my choosing, I guess. And I would always pick the cereal with the coolest prize in the box. And then I would get home and I'd dump out all the cereal and I'd get the prize and I'd put all the cereal back in the box. And it was always about like moving fast, getting to the punchline, getting the thing quickly. So I think when you add all that together, like high trait neuroticism, high trait extroversion, high trait openness, risk tolerance, wanting to get to the punchline quickly, like I wither in bureaucracy. I My excitability, it's like having this fuel source and not tapping it properly, and I think entrepreneurship has been the only thing where as much as I can give, as much as I can output, it needs. It's like a never ending abyss would be a negative way to phrase it, but when it works properly, it's like I'm powering something, which it's like a system. I'm powering something which is powering me, which is powering something, and it's almost self-reinforcing or self-sustaining. Um, so I've never found anything professionally or otherwise that can tolerate my level of energy. Most things, whether it's a boss or a girlfriend or a friend, they're like everyone needs me in small doses. And the only thing that hasn't needed me in small doses is my company. It needs all of me all the time. And then the reward of outputting, seeing something you've done out in the world and actually happening very quickly, and that fueling you with enthusiasm and excitement to then pull more out of you. It has just leveled me up and made me a better or more iterated version of myself than anything else could have possibly, definitionally, because anything else I would have, once every 3 months or once a year should have gone through an iteration or a period of growth. But almost to this day, 5 years later, daily, certainly weekly, I'm becoming better, being challenged, this week, Ella, I had the biggest check in our history fall into our account. I signed not only our biggest client, but who could be our biggest client by 100x. I got embroiled in a social media thing that could have literally not torn the company down, but caused us really, really big damage, where people accused us of being predatory towards creators and paying them less than they deserve. And it went viral. That's this week, the biggest highs and the biggest lows. 5 years in, I'm still on this roller coaster. So I think it suits me. It suits my temperament. And like, that's why I think it chose me, because in the same way people believe that they have a soulmate or that there's something greater that connects them to the person that they feel most connected to. It's like, wow, I never thought I could feel this safe or this in love. I feel that way about my company.